When we say a better viewer experience, what we're talking about is the end-to-end experience that your viewers receive everywhere from the login to the browsing, the navigation, and finding the content, and of course to the actual viewing experience itself. We also extend this to the support for high quality video on a wide range of devices. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to Kati, who's going to walk us through what are the trends we've seen in the industry that validate that the quality of the viewer experience is one of the most important issues for modern streaming broadcasters to consider in 2020.
Thanks, Kieran. Let's start with a couple of examples that illustrate the growing impact of the viewer experience. So what happens when expectations are not met? A lot can go wrong, and the following issues from the past year led to notable press. Unfortunately, not the type of press broadcasters, streaming service, and content providers were looking for. Starting here with HBO's Game of Thrones, where each episode of the last season cost a staggering $50 million. Viewers were actually left in the dark, and they were not able to see the dragons and epic battle scenes. The reasons why? They were very technical and hard to understand for the average viewer. Next, Disney Plus. Their much anticipated launch did not take off as smooth as expected. Disney not only received a high volume in customer service help calls, their launch issues became the fodder for the late night host and reached an even wider audience. And last but not least, an example from the sports world. This time, Fox Sports and the NFL got hit with a viewers backlash. The apparently avoidable issue got mapped back to different HDR formats. But viewers not only expect great quality, they expect great quality no matter what device they're watching on. And we saw that in our survey as well. And multi-device viewing is the new standard. The typical OTT user accesses their content via 3 different devices. And that amounts to over 802 million connected devices in the US alone. So looking at this now from the provider side, we learned from the developer report the stunning amount of platforms the developers are actually being tasked to support. The top 3 platforms across all regions are Apple TV, Android TV, and Chromecast, with one regional outlier. Roku made it under the top 3 in North America, and North America only.
Great. So I appreciate that background, and I also appreciate calling out some of the specifics, like the fact that you actually will see regional device usage differences. And that example of Roku is a really good example. So not only are we seeing global splintering of platform usage, we actually see this changing on a regional basis, which significantly adds complexity. So those are the 2 top trend summaries, that we have the increase in devices and platform complexity, and we have increased pressure on the quality of the viewer experience. So therefore, if we look at what does that mean for the broadcasters, in order to compete in the modern market, the broadcasters need to master the entire video tech stack with the highest quality solutions. And we really mean this end to end. Even things like your authentication provider or your DRM system become key links in that chain for viewer quality. And of course, we need to come to terms with a multi-device world. Now I'd like to hand it over to Chris, who's going to help us understand what are the technology considerations that are going to be required from broadcasters as we look to 2020 and beyond to make sure we meet this goal of high quality viewer experiences.
Thank you, Kieran. I think you and Kati already said it. Basically, we live in a multi-codec world, and we think 2020 will be the year where we move away from the monolithic dominance of H.264 into a multi-codec world. And I think this is just natural. I mean, if you look at the statistics on the right side, for example, we see for sure you can reach like 100% of the devices with H.264, but you are not providing the best quality to our users by just using H.264. There are codecs out there which are much more efficient. Just like VP9 or HEVC, they are 50% more efficient than H.264. And you can reach a stunning amount of devices with these codecs. So you can actually reduce your costs with these codecs, or keep your costs in the same amount and double the quality for your users. I think this is what is required in the market. This is what we see. And actually we think that this complexity will just continue to grow. So we think with new formats coming out, AV1, for example, but also VVC and AV2, which are currently in the making, for 2020 and beyond, this will be the theme. in general, we hear people always talking about Netflix grade quality, but if you want to have Netflix grade quality, it also needs Netflix grade complexity. Netflix is using all of that codecs. Netflix is using a lot of very complex technologies like per title encoding, for example, to deliver the best possible quality for their users and their viewers. And if you want to do so, you also need to deal with the same complexity. We think it's to some degree unrealistic to support this end-to-end internally for most of the broadcasters. So we think they need to partner with somebody who is really an expert in the OTT area so that they can basically focus on what they do well and also focus on the content, because we see it the same way as a small company. You only have so many developers, you only have so many resources. You need to focus on the things that you are doing really well. I think this will be a real theme of 2020, and we think in 2020 the complexity of these workflows will just continue to grow. But it's needed to deliver superior quality, basically. That's the bar that is set by a lot of other services out there, and that's the bar that is set by the broadcast and linear signals that we see. And I think the companies that will be able to adapt to these changes very quickly, the companies that manage to deal with the complexity of these workflows, will be the winners of 2020 and beyond. Another thing, when we are talking about complexity, it's not only on the codec side. We see a lot of what we call value-added features coming out. What we mean with that is basically things like high dynamic range HDR or Dolby Vision, offline playback, 4K and soon 8K, advanced Dolby and DTS audio. And this is just a short list. This list will continue to grow. So you can not think that that's it. And if I implement these 4 things on there, then I'm good to go. Basically, new innovations are coming out on a continuous basis in this market. And only companies that are able to adapt very quickly, companies that have processes which are very agile, will be the companies that will basically be able to survive in that market. And we think companies that are set up in this way, that are agile enough to adapt to these new features quickly, will be the winners of 2020 in terms of viewer experience. As we heard from Kati already, devices are growing like crazy. I think everybody who works in that market has experienced that. We researched some statistics and they're basically all showing the same. There's a picture on the right-hand side, which basically shows a device profile growth from 2011 to 2019. Device profile means here basically a device paired with an operating system. So it doesn't mean that we have, or that these statistics see 63,000 different devices. It sees 63,000 different device profiles, which is a device combination with an operating system. But still, these are devices that you have to test for. These are devices that your consumers are using to access your platforms. These are the devices that you basically need to deliver a very superior experience. The statistics are from the top 80,000 websites. And we also see, and everybody sees that more or less, that this continues to grow. It's growing with almost 20% over a year, and in the future, basically, this will just continue. And look at the market right now. Devices are coming out or coming to market on a 6-month basis, and only companies that are able to adapt very quickly to that are the companies that will basically be the winners of 2020. Yeah, even worse for some, to reach like 95% of devices, which is typically a thing what we hear from most of the developers. If you build something, a particular feature, or if you harden your workflow, you typically want to do it in a way that you at least reach 95% of the devices. But in the media market, we have this long tail of devices, pretty nicely shown in the graphic on the right side, actually. So on the y-axis, you basically see the reach that you get. And on the x-axis, you see the devices that you need to support. You see that getting to 50% of the devices, you just need to test a couple of devices or control a couple of devices. But if we take, for example, North America, the green line, you need to test like 350 devices already to just get to 95% of device reach. So you see to get to 50, 60, 70% is not easy, but it's very much possible. So, but to get this last 20, 30% that are really needed to deliver a superior quality, basically, that's the really hard part. That's the last mile that everybody has to go, I think, so in 2020 to deliver a really good experience. Also, if you look at other continents, for example, Africa, then thank you. Then basically, you need to support even more devices. You look there, it's like 650 devices that you need to test for. So that's not an easy part. And I think this problem will continue to grow. We think this tail will actually get longer. So basically, it will get harder and harder over time to support all these devices. Companies that don't have the processes in place to support this will not be able to make it in this market. Device fragmentation in general will continue to grow as said, and it's not a one-off project. The video market is shifting very quickly, and it will continue to do so. You can accept it, you can deny it, but we think it is what it is. And in the future, it will just get worse. Devices get out on a 6-month basis, we heard. The value-added features we thought just before are coming to market. This is something where you have to adapt really quickly. In general, we think only companies that are flexible enough to adapt will continue to deliver a superior video experience in 2020 and beyond. A very important thing, what we see currently, I mean, you can only improve if you measure. So before you can even start to optimize, you need to measure. And we see a lot of companies that don't do this. We see a lot of companies sometimes doing the simple things, but sometimes not even those on a continuous basis, like testing your workflows or your encodings on a regular basis on BMAF, PSNR, and SSIM, and taking actions based on these metrics, considering or measuring your buffering, your bitrate quality, and playback failures on a continuous basis, and also taking actions based on these metrics. But we don't see a lot of companies really going into detail here and taking advantage of the more advanced metrics and data, for example. So the adaptation behavior of individual sessions, the adaptation behavior in individual regions, individual countries, for example, of individual users, and really tailoring the experience for these users, measuring and improving on a day-by-day basis. Also, bitrate usage patterns are something that we not see many companies basically taking a deeper look into and optimizing their encoding profiles for. Same for convex hars for encodings. I mean, we don't see many companies really taking measurements there on the convex har side on a continuous basis if they change codec settings, if they change or if they use different codecs, and also adapting based on the viewers that they see in their systems. Doing this in real time is something that we think is very important because, I mean, this is something new. This is, I think, the standard principle of every company that wants to grow, basically. The faster you can run experiments, the faster you can grow, basically, because not every hypothesis that you have, not every experiment will get the expected result. So the faster you can run an experiment, the faster you can actually see that what you think is probably wrong or what you thought is right, basically, and redo the experiment and get it in production or change it. So it's really important how fast you can run these experiments. We think companies will get much better, basically, on this in 2020, and the best ones will be able to run experiments on a daily basis, and to that degree also improve on a daily basis.